Welcome back for another video. It's Eharbad once more, and today I wanted to have a little conversation about Cursed City. We are now, I think, what is it, 14, 15 days in, and we'll come back to that in a minute. If we go to the old global rankings, I am actually 42nd with 94 stages complete. There are 3 people globally who have beaten it fully, which is not many. Earlier this morning, it was only 2. And we will ultimately touch on that. I do want to kind of give an overview. I gave my first impressions, which obviously was restricted to the first 6 stages that I completed. And it was very much just kind of what I was thinking on the very first day without having unlocked and played the majority of the content, which I now have. Overall, and for anyone who doesn't want to go into all the details and just wants my main takeaway, I think it's actually good content overall. Now, there are some critical flaws, which we'll get into. I do think it's the content the game needed, but I think it's 12 months too late. I think that this should have either been telegraphed or released quite a long time ago, when player engagement was higher, basically. I've enjoyed parts of it, but I don't think it's captured my mind as much as Doom Tower did. And truth be told, I think that's more a reflection of me, where I am in my raid journey, than the game mode itself. I think I'm jaded. This extra year where we've been content starved and been receiving things like Live Arena, Iron Twins, Shogun, blah, 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 Sand Devil. I'm just not receptive to the game mode as I would have been a year ago. And I think that's affecting the level of interest and excitement I have for it, rather than being a fair reflection of the game mode itself. But anyway, that's more of a personal thing, and I'm sure many of you in the comments will either agree with me or disagree with me, and feel free to say either way and why. Now I'm going to break it down to different parts of the game mode and give my views on each specific area. Firstly, the final boss, Amius the Lunar Archon. I think it's actually decent for a once a month encounter, but I kind of feel like they could have made it a little bit more interesting. I'm not sure exactly in what element, but a couple of things that come to mind. It feels a little bit RNG with the unavoidable loss of control, specifically being, where is it? When he's in his second form and you have this sleep. And yes, okay, mythical champions aren't affected by it, whoop-de-doo. But it's not the kind of game design that I enjoy, at least a mechanic where you have an unavoidable loss of control of your champions isn't something that I love. So your strategy is based around surviving the loss of control and figuring out a way of reducing the impact that's going to have on you, rather than bringing something that prevents you from losing control in the first place, or playing with a strategy where you can retain control. Anyway, that's just my own personal view. I think that's a little bit not a great mechanic personally. I also think the rebirth is pointless RNG and adds nothing. And if anyone's not sure what that is, it's one of the passives where if he dies when he's got Eclipse up, basically, he will revive. Now, where is it? It's in there somewhere. I just don't know where it is. There you go. Revives Amius if he's killed under an Eclipse buff. I think this is just unnecessarily RNG. It doesn't add anything in terms of interest to the fight. You can't necessarily perfectly plan which form he's going to be in when you kill him because of the RNG of damage itself. So I don't love it. I don't love it. On the plus side, I think there are many ways to tackle the boss, and it's challenging enough but doable. I think the actual difficulty level is perfectly on point. Like, I think it's a good level of difficulty. 10 people in my clan have cleared it, which I think is probably the right amount, to be honest. I do think Curse City is meant to be hard. You know, it should be noticeably harder than Doom Tower and Faction Wars and Hydra because it's something that you ultimately want to work towards. But it needs to be achievable. These things need to be an achievable goal. Otherwise, people are going to be like, well, there's no point. I'm never going to do it. Anyway, that's the final boss. Let's get on to the awakened stages. And controversially, I'm going to say I actually think this is an excellent implementation. I think it's bang on point. As a way of kind of enhancing secret rooms from Doom Tower, I think the awakened stages are actually done really, really well. Levels can be farmed from the twins and the marketplace, and there's a long-term path to success. I think the roster restrictions are fairly lenient. It forces diversity of champions based on soul RNG. So if we just take a look at this stage, which I beat this morning, and the key to me beating it was I managed to buy the 3-star Mithrala soul. So I just need to clear my throat. I managed to buy the 3-star Mithrala soul from the marketplace today. Took out Artak, who had a 5-star, bought in, basically managed to end up with having Elva in the team. So I had a extra pair of buffs, block debuffs, and specifically a revive. Ended up using this 6-star Taragi, who I absolutely wouldn't have used otherwise. Probably wouldn't have used Crypt King ideally. These two champions are not the ones that I would have picked had it not been for the Awakening restrictions. But the point is, I guess, it allows you to, you know, sometimes bring a champion that you might not otherwise use that you just got lucky with RNG. Makes you think about who you're going to buy the souls for to be able to do stages like this. And yeah, I think it's actually quite well done. Now, would I have enjoyed it as much if I didn't have Seer? But then I bought all 6 stars on Seer. I bought the Mithrala souls, I pulled Crypt King, pulled Taragi, and I think I bought Elva as well. But if I didn't have Seer, it would be definitely more difficult. I'd probably have to go down the HP burn route, Artak, Crypt King, and then I'd be 1 star short, so I'd probably need to get another star for Elva, or get a 2nd star on Arbiter, or try something else. But the point is, even if that were the case, and even if I couldn't clear it this month, I know over time this is something I'm going to be able to clear. You have quite a large range of champions available, and you can make the decisions about which ones you're going to buy those extra levels to be able to get this content done. So I actually really thought that this was well implemented, and I have to say that, even if it's controversial. Right, the next thing I wanted to talk about is things like Iron Twins and Sand Devil, and really all the level 300 bosses, which is only 3 of them. There's Finite Heart there as well. I enjoyed the challenge. The fact you only need to beat them once and not farm them, I think was critical to that. If I had to farm, you know, these bosses with these restrictions, it would be hell on earth, but doing it once, I actually quite enjoyed. My concern, however, is that the restrictions are perhaps a little bit too tight, and without key legendary champions, it's going to be a roadblock for many. So we've got 3 factions here, HP support against what is a pretty challenging boss. And truth be told, if you don't have Brogni, it's definitely going to be tough. Really, I would say if you had either Brogni or Oella, it becomes doable. Maybe Emic can carry it as well, but ideally you would want to have 2 of them, really. And then if we go Sand Devil, there are options. We've got 3 factions, 2 attack types. There are some options. I believe there is an epic that's able to do it. I thought Torture Helm was in this restriction list, but maybe isn't. You know, with the old Phoenix style. Anyway, I know people have soloed it with epics, but I haven't actually watched the videos on it. Otherwise, Pythian can solo it. Pythian can do it in a traditional build with support. It's a tricky boss, and I would say the restrictions of the actual boss doesn't lend itself that well to this game mode. Same with Shogun. I feel like those bosses are so restrictive over who you bring that these aren't necessarily the best bosses to be candidates for this treatment. Similar with Finite Hard, it's a very unique, specific boss, but you can do it, and you can do it with quite an unusual kind of sets of champions. I feel like these are probably just about okay. I would maybe loosen the restriction to add one more faction in each one, and then I think it would probably be well balanced. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is double bosses. I thought it was a bit of a gimmick at first, but I think it really shakes up the encounters and makes it far more challenging than it otherwise would be. I think adding in the roster restriction, which 4 factions I think is about right, and it's genuinely fun. I'd like to see them actually try more challenge content like this, maybe even add temporary dungeons where we have a tournament alongside in the general game mode, so without any faction restriction, that gives us enhanced drop rates. Say, 3 times chance of mythical 6-star, maybe something like that would really encourage us to farm those temporary dungeons. And it could be on some kind of rotation, just a temporary thing that would be a little bit more fun in between fusion, something like that. The biggest downer I see is that I can't get to the last 2 of them. They're locked over here at the end of Soul Cross, and I can't even get to try these things. So whereas, say, secret rooms in Doom Tower, where you have the restrictions, are optional content, here you have every single wave floor has set restrictions, and that really brings me into the last part, and probably the thing that the area of the content that I think's the weakest is the wave stages. And I would say if we start off in Cobble Market, is it Cobble Market or Cobble? Yeah, Cobble Market. It's too easy. It's trivially easy. And I mentioned this in the first impressions, and people said, but you need some easy area for people that don't have developed accounts to participate in. But that's what normal's for, truth be told. Like, the whole point is, if you need to fight weaker opponents, you should be in normal. By the time you're trying to hit hard, it should be relatively hard. And starting at level 90 on the champion side is ridiculously easy, particularly if you think of the scaling, where we then end up at 270. So I think the difficulty curve within a given difficulty is too extreme. I'd rather see the easy stages to be in the normal mode with a relatively flat difficulty curve, and the hard to start a bit harder, but maybe not get quite as punitive as it does. And the problem with the difficulty curve here, where I say it's punitive, it's not just, you can't beat it. I'm talking about the stages that I've beaten as well. There's a bunch of them where, if you don't have Ragash, you're going to struggle on S8. You're going to struggle on S12. Like, if you don't have Ragash on this stage, you're really, really in for a problem. Like, that's the simple truth. So I was able to beat some of these stages that are extremely difficult, but that doesn't mean that I think they are well designed. Simply because if you have wave stages that require 1 or 2 specific legendary champions, and a game has over 800 champions, is how do players, whether they spend or not, realistically acquire the champions required to beat them? There is no way to farm these champions. So I look at S14, and I've said this in a couple of other videos. If you don't have Shirmani, you're absolutely toast. Now, reality is, if you have an Alsgor and Lonathara, you're in a better place, and obviously Deliana as well. And, you know, these two were available, but a lot of people did skip them. And this is part of what I talk about, the telegraphing of things. If we had better insight that this content was going to come and what restrictions might be in play, it would actually have massively improved player engagement in things like Lonathara, in Alsgor, even in Timid as well, is another example of a fusion that was only, a month ago. And a lot of people skipped it because he seemed pretty trash. But he satisfies this exact restriction. It's like, the problem now is if you didn't get those champions, is how are you ever going to realistically get the champions you now need to beat this stage? So at this point, there's, say, I need 3 legendaries from a very specific 3 legendaries. Even if I was a big spender, how am I going to get those champions? And that, for me, is the biggest problem with the way they've structured this piece of content, particularly Soulcross, where you've got very narrow restrictions, only 3 factions, and a single affinity, and not even... So you've got like 3 layers of restriction on top of each other. It's not just all force within the 3 factions. You could have a 4th faction, you could get rid of the HP support, or get rid of the force. Like, having 3 degrees of restriction means it's extremely narrow. Same thing here again. 3 factions, 1 affinity, 2 champion types, of 4 champion types. So you're getting so narrow. And again, we look here and it's like, if you don't have really Lord Champhor or Killian the Lucky, you have no hope. There's no one with my roster, at least on Hell Hades Tool, who has cleared any of the stages that I haven't yet done. And this one's even worse because it's only rare or epic, so legendaries aren't allowed in only 3 factions of spirit type. And you look at best teams, 4 people in the world have now beaten it. And look at the diversity. There isn't any. So unless you have Morag, who I don't actually have, it's basically impossible. And yeah, I mean, this one, at least because it's epics, I will, over time, I believe I will end up pulling this epic, most likely. Maybe there'll be a progressive for her, and I'll be able to do it at some point in the future. But the legendaries that I require for S20 and S14, I don't see myself getting them. I don't see people who are spenders necessarily getting them. And how are people that are relatively new to the game? I've been playing 3.5 years at this point, approaching 4 years, really like 3 3/4. If you're a relatively new player and you're looking at the level of restriction, you're like, oh, if I don't have Ragash, I can't do it. If I don't have Shimani, I can't do it. There's just layers and layers of restriction on just even being able to get to the fun content, which I would call the boss stages, the awakening stages, double boss. These are the ones I actually quite enjoyed trying to do because it allowed you to engage your brain. There is no engagement of brain to do this. It's either you have 1 or 2 very specific champions, or you can't even try, basically. So yeah, I mean, overall, I'd say awakenings can be farmed, but roster locking cannot. Now, it might be that they'll end up releasing some fusions that will help with these specific stages. They might release some mythical champions. It might give you a daily login. Who knows, right? And that's part of the problem, is that Plarium never give any forward guidance for people to be able to plan to be able to beat future content. If we had known as player base, we probably would have picked up Lonatharil and Alsgore. But we didn't, and it's like, I get why they do it from a business perspective. They want to do the whole FOMO thing, so you believe you have to get everything. But it's just not great from a player enjoyment experience. And another good example I'd say of that is this Yuletide Titan event. It was a pretty good event overall. I quite like the way it's structured. My issue is they didn't give us a schedule up front, so we couldn't plan how we were going to get the 2,000 points. And because we're so distrusting of Plarium, if you wanted to do it, we had to front load our points and end up with 300 excess that I get nothing for. These aren't even going to be converted into anything that's usable. They don't roll over to another event. They're just wasted. And that's purely because they just don't communicate with the player base. They don't allow us to plan the future and to be excited about what's coming up. It's like they want to keep everything close to their chest, so you're always having to second guess them and basically try and force the player base to believe they have to do everything for fear that by not doing something, they're going to hamstring themselves. And that is kind of actually the truth in this situation. I think they're both high elves. Yeah, by having skipped Lonatharil and having skipped Alsgore in the Barbarian, I'm now unable to progress. And I think the big thing that they've missed, big opportunity they had, was Doom Tower secret rooms, which I wonder if you can you find them? No, you can't. But let's just go to the fragment summon, because there's still a bunch of them I never actually summoned. Where is the use of all of these Doom Tower secret room champions? If you ever wanted to create a self-fulfilling game mode, these should have been the linchpin champions that you ultimately could have farmed to then progress in Cursed City, which would then be available to all players, would ensure that people are playing Doom Tower for the long term, doing those secret rooms, because then by getting these champions, you're then able to go in and do those rooms. Now, the problem with the Doom Tower secret room champions is most of them are trash, and B, they're not even the right restriction to fit in to the game mode. But even if they were the right restriction to fit into the game mode, they're not going to help you clear these pieces of content, because other than like Barsatha and Urost, they're pretty rubbish. Most of them, maybe Gomlock's average, decent actually probably for this kind of content. But none of the Doom Tower secret room legendary champions are the ones that feature in this Soul Cross area, and I think that probably for me is where the game design was somewhat lacking. I like challenge. I'm perfectly happy with the idea that I haven't cleared the Cursed City, except for one thing. I think the rewards are too heavily tilted towards full completion. So you see, I'm top 42 in the world. I've cleared 94 stages, but I've only ended up with 45 out of 100 candles, which obviously is quite disappointing. I think it would have been better if they'd done 20 candles for a full clear of each region and 20 candles for the final boss. So therefore, if you cleared 3 regions and the final boss, you get 80, and then I'd only be losing out on 20. There's still an incentive to go and clear the rest. I think they could have other rewards for the full clear that would be more interesting. But one little example of that is, why not give us as a reward, and And you could either have it unlocked when you get the 6-star awakening, or a resource that you get for, say, a full clear like this, or for, really high placement like Gold 4 Tag Team or in Platinum Arena, something like that. It's a one-time unlock on a champion where you get a second loadout. So you can have two completely distinct sets of masteries, blessing, and gear. So you get basically two loadouts in a champion, and you can pre-fight select which loadout you're going to use. And that would save people the need to long-term do loads of respecking all the time. You can have like a PvP and a PvE loadout, or like you have a specific build that you want to do for like solo farming, but then you want them to be useful in group content. It gives you something to work towards. It doesn't actually break the game in any way. There's no competitive advantage that way. And when you add mechanics such as with Amius, where Cycler Magic is basically ruined, you at least can earn the second loadout for that champion and have the second configuration tailored towards that boss. Anyway, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed the talk and the discussion around Cursed City, and please, like I said, in the comment section, let me know what you think. I've overall enjoyed the first iteration of Cursed City. My biggest concern is that Plarium will not adjust it. There are some adjustments I think they need to make. It's not in a perfect end state, but if we look at their history, they don't tend to iterate, which is the biggest cause for concern for me. As always, bye for now.